In 1977, a group of geologists lowered a submersible called Alvin to the floor of the Pacific Ocean, roughly 250 miles northeast of the Galapagos Islands, at a depth of about 2,500 meters. They were there to look at rocks. Specifically, they were trying to map the hydrothermal activity along the Galapagos Rift, a crack in the ocean floor where tectonic plates pull apart, allowing superheated water to escape from below the crust. The geology was interesting. Nobody expected much else. What they found instead was a garden. In the total darkness of the deep ocean floor, in water that should have been near freezing and almost completely barren, there were tube worms 3 meters tall, clustered so densely that the seafloor was invisible beneath them. There were white crabs and mussels and clams the size of dinner plates and organisms nobody had ever catalogued, living in numbers that had no business existing at 2,500 meters depth. The water around the vent was warm, the chemistry was bizarre, and every living thing in that garden was feeding, directly or indirectly, on something that would kill a human in minutes. The discovery at the Galapagos Rift in 1977 didn't just add new species to the catalog. It broke one of the foundational assumptions of biology, that all life on Earth ultimately depends on sunlight. It doesn't. And what runs the oases of the deep ocean instead is one of the most elegant and most disturbing energy systems in all of biology. To understand what's happening at a hydrothermal vent, you need to understand what a hydrothermal vent actually is. The ocean floor is not solid. It's a mosaic of tectonic plates constantly moving, pulling apart at mid-ocean ridges, colliding at subduction zones, grinding against each other at transform faults. At mid-ocean ridges, where plates diverge, seawater seeps down through cracks in the ocean floor, penetrating deep into the crust. As it descends, it gets closer to magma chambers. The temperature climbs. At depth, it can reach 400 degrees Celsius or more, far above the boiling point at the surface, but under pressure so extreme that it stays liquid. This superheated water dissolves minerals from the surrounding rock as it moves through the crust. Sulfur compounds, metals, hydrogen sulfide, methane. Then it finds a crack upward and erupts back onto the seafloor. When it hits the near-freezing seawater above, the dissolved minerals precipitate out of solution almost instantly, forming the distinctive black or white plumes that give the structures their names: black smokers and white smokers. Black smokers erupt at temperatures up to 400 degrees and carry iron sulfide particles that give the plume its dark color. The chimneys they build, stacks of precipitated minerals, some reaching 60 meters tall, can grow several centimeters per day. White smokers run cooler, around 40 to 75 degrees C, and carry different mineral compositions that produce white or pale plumes. Both types are chemically toxic environments by any standard measure. The water around them is acidic, metal-laden, and saturated with hydrogen sulfide, a compound that shuts down cellular respiration in most living things by binding to the enzyme that processes oxygen. In the immediate vicinity of a black smoker, there is no life. The temperature is lethal, the chemistry is lethal, and the pressure fluctuations as the vent pulses are lethal. But a few meters away, in the mixing zone where vent fluid dilutes into ambient seawater, the chemistry changes. The temperature drops. The hydrogen sulfide concentration reaches a range that is still toxic to most organisms, but to a specific group of microbes, it is not toxic at all. It is food. These microbes are called chemolithotrophs. The name means, roughly, rock eaters, organisms that derive energy not from sunlight and photosynthesis, but from chemical reactions. In the vent mixing zone, they oxidize hydrogen sulfide. They strip electrons from it and use the energy released by that process to fix carbon dioxide into organic compounds. It's the same basic logic as photosynthesis. Use an energy source to build organic molecules from inorganic starting materials. But the energy source is a chemical reaction instead of light. The chemolithotrophs are the base of the entire vent food web. Everything else, the tube worms, the crabs, the mussels, the fish, the shrimp that swarm the vent chimneys, is eating them, or eating something that ate them, or hosting them internally in a symbiotic relationship that is itself one of the stranger things in biology. The giant tube worm, Riftia pachyptila, does not have a mouth. It has no gut, no digestive system of any kind. It absorbs hydrogen sulfide and oxygen through a feathery red plume at its top. The plume gets its color from hemoglobin, which binds both oxygen and hydrogen sulfide simultaneously and carries both to specialized cells in an organ called the trophosome, which occupies most of the worm's body cavity. Inside the trophosome, chemosynthetic bacteria live in densities of up to 10 billion cells per gram of tissue. The bacteria oxidize the hydrogen sulfide the worm delivers, fix carbon dioxide, and produce organic compounds. The worm absorbs those compounds directly. There is no mouth because there is no need for one. The entire digestive function has been outsourced to bacteria living inside the worm's body. Riftia pachyptila is the fastest growing marine invertebrate known. It can grow from nothing to more than a meter in length in under 2 years. In an environment where food is scarce for most animals, the tube worm has essentially solved the food scarcity problem by becoming a mobile habitat for the microbes that make food from scratch. In exchange for delivery of raw chemical inputs, the bacteria provide all the nutrition the worm needs. This is not a loose partnership. The bacteria cannot survive outside the trophosome. The worm cannot survive without the bacteria. They have co-evolved into something that functions as a single metabolic unit, a symbiosis so complete that the boundary between worm and bacteria has become, in some functional sense, meaningless. The ecosystem that builds up around a vent follows a pattern, once you know what to look for. Closest to the vent, in the hottest, most chemically extreme water that multicellular life can tolerate, are the tube worms and the vent mussels and clams, all of which host internal chemosynthetic bacteria. These animals are the primary consumers. They don't eat anyone else. They manufacture their own nutrition from the chemical gradient the vent provides. Slightly further out, you find the grazers, amphipods, limpets, snails, feeding on mats of free-living chemosynthetic bacteria that coat every hard surface near the vent. Then the predators, crabs, fish, octopuses, and one animal that deserves its own paragraph. The Pompeii worm, Alvinella pompejana, lives directly on the surface of black smoker chimneys, the hottest multicellular habitat on Earth. The temperature at its head end, exposed to the ambient seawater, is around 20 degrees. The temperature at its tail, buried in the chimney wall, has been measured at up to 80 degrees. This 58-degree gradient, across an animal roughly 13 centimeters long, is the steepest thermal gradient any multicellular organism is known to endure. The worm appears to manage it by maintaining a dense coat of bacteria on its back, bacteria that may act as thermal insulation or may provide nutrition, or both. We don't fully know. The Pompeii worm is among the least studied of the major vent animals, partly because removing it from its environment for analysis destroys it almost immediately. Further from the vent, where the chemical gradient fades and the food web becomes more conventional, you find animals that are not specialized vent species at all: deep-sea fish, cephalopods, larger crustaceans. Attracted by the unusual density of prey the vent ecosystem produces. The vent doesn't just support the animals living directly on it. It radiates biological productivity outward into the surrounding deep ocean. Here is the thing about hydrothermal vents that tends to be left out of most discussions of them. They don't last. A hydrothermal vent is powered by magmatic heat, the proximity of the seafloor to an active magma chamber. When the magma chamber cools, or when tectonic activity shifts the plumbing, the vent dies. The hot water stops flowing. The hydrogen sulfide stops coming. The chemosynthetic bacteria have nothing to oxidize. The food web collapses from the bottom up. Everything that specialized for the vent, the tube worms, the Pompeii worms, the vent mussels, dies. A vent ecosystem that took decades to build can be extinguished in weeks. Individual vents typically last between 10 and 100 years. Some last longer, some collapse faster. The longest-lived vents known are thought to be on the order of a few centuries before the underlying geology shifts. For animals whose entire biology is built around vent chemistry, this creates an existential problem. How do you survive when your habitat is temporary and scattered across thousands of miles of empty deep ocean floor? The answer, for most vent species, is larvae. Almost all major vent animals reproduce by releasing larvae, tiny, free-swimming, capable of dispersal in ocean currents that can travel tens or hundreds of kilometers before settling. The larvae don't know where they're going. They drift. Some of them, by luck of current and timing, land near an active vent and begin the process of colonization. Most don't. Most settle somewhere there is no vent chemistry and die. The successful colonization events produce what researchers call vent succession, a predictable sequence of species that establishes itself on a new vent. Microbial mats first, within days of a new vent becoming active. Then the primary consumers, tube worms, mussels, within months to years. Then the grazers, then the predators. The whole sequence, from bare rock to full ecosystem, in a decade or two. We have observed this succession directly at vents near the Juan de Fuca Ridge and the East Pacific Rise, where tectonic events extinguished existing vents and opened new ones on timescales we could watch. The colonization of a new vent by organisms that had never been there before, arriving from other vents hundreds of miles away via larvae that had been drifting in the dark, happens fast enough to be documented, and is one of the more remarkable things in all of marine ecology. The reason the discovery in 1977 mattered so much was not just the biology, it was the implication. If life can run entirely on chemical energy, if photosynthesis is not the only way to power an ecosystem, but merely the most common one on the surface of this particular planet, then the conditions required for life are much broader than we had assumed. Before 1977, the search for life elsewhere in the solar system was largely constrained to surfaces where liquid water and sunlight could coexist. After 1977, the relevant question changed. Not where is there sunlight, but where is there liquid water and a chemical gradient? The answer to that question includes Europa, Jupiter's moon, which is thought to have a liquid water ocean beneath an ice shell, kept liquid by tidal heating from Jupiter's gravity, the same basic mechanism that drives hydrothermal activity on Earth. It includes Enceladus, Saturn's moon, which is actively venting water vapor from what appears to be a subsurface ocean, with plumes that have been found to contain hydrogen, a potential energy source for chemolithotrophes. It includes Titan, where the chemistry is different, but the principle of chemical gradient-powered metabolism is not. The vent ecosystems of the deep ocean did not just demonstrate that life can survive in extreme conditions. They demonstrated that the energy accounting of biology is more flexible than anyone had realized. That wherever chemistry produces a gradient, wherever electrons can be passed from a donor to an acceptor and energy captured in the transaction, life will find a way to exploit it. The Alvin crew in 1977 thought they were going to look at rocks. What they found was evidence that life as a phenomenon is far less fragile than it appears from the surface.